Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, let's get right into it. Imagine this, the brand new AI search tool at your library, the one that's supposed to make research easier. What if it was actually hiding information from you? That's not a hypothetical. We're going to dive into a real case where a library's search engine just refused to search. So this all kicks off with a scenario pointed out by researcher Aaron Tay. And you got to understand, this isn't some what-if situation. It's happening right now as libraries roll out these new AI search tools. Just picture it. You're a student, you've got a paper due, you search for a huge, well-known historical event, and the library's fancy, state-of-the-art system just comes back with nothing, blank, like it never even happened. And it wasn't a one-off. As people started testing these new AI tools from a big vendor, Clarivate, a really troubling pattern emerged. You see here, searches for super important topics. I mean, things like the Tulsa race riot or the Gaza war. They weren't just getting weird results. No, they were just hitting a brick wall, an error message, or even crazier, 0 results. Now get this. This tool is supposed to be searching a database with over 1 billion documents, and it finds nothing? Something's clearly wrong. All right, so this brings us to our first big question. What was going on with these failed searches? Again, this wasn't some random glitch or a user making a typo. The more people that tried it out, the clearer it became that this was a deep systemic problem. It was affecting a whole slew of topics that are, sensitive maybe, but absolutely crucial for academic research. And of course, this immediately makes you wonder, right? Is a company deliberately censoring its own tools? Are they intentionally blocking certain topics? I mean, that's a pretty chilling thought. But as the researchers kept digging, the real answer turned out to be, well, a lot weirder and honestly maybe even more concerning. There's that old saying, Hanlon's razor, and it fits perfectly here. Because even though the result looked exactly like censorship, the way it was failing was just too weird. It was all over the place. A simple block list, a list of forbidden words, it just wouldn't act like this. So let's dive into that question. Was this censorship or just some bizarre technical glitch? We're going to follow the breadcrumbs here, look at the evidence that started pointing away from some big conspiracy and toward a really strange technical problem. Okay, and this is where things get really wild. Check out these examples. If you search for pretty much anything with the word massacre in it, you'd get an error. But if you typed it out as a full sentence, this is a massacre, it worked just fine. And look at this one. Gaza war fails. Nothing. But just swap the words to war in Gaza, and boom, perfect results. This is the key clue right here. This kind of crazy inconsistency, that's not how a simple block list works. Something much weirder is at play. So if the search tool itself wasn't built to block these words, then what was the problem? What was the real culprit? Well, it turns out the problem wasn't even in the library software. As they say, the call was coming from outside the house. And here it is. The problem was eventually traced back to a totally separate system. A mandatory content safety filter from Microsoft's Azure OpenAI service. Now, this is the crucial part. This filter doesn't live inside the search tool. It sits between your search query and the actual AI model. It's basically a digital bouncer, deciding which searches even get to walk through the door. So how does this bouncer decide who gets in? Well, it's pretty methodical. It scores every single thing you type into the search box against these 4 categories: hate, sexual, violence, and self-harm. So when a student types Tulsa race riot, the system sees the word riot and probably flags it under violence with a medium or high severity score. And what happens then? The filter just slams the door. It completely blocks the query. It never even gets to the AI, which is exactly why the user just sees an error message. And this gets to the absolute core of the problem. This is a classic case of the right tool being used for the completely wrong job. See, a filter like this is perfect for stopping a public chatbot, like, on a company's website, from going off the rails and saying crazy stuff. Great tool for that. But using it for academic search, wow, that's like trying to perform delicate surgery with a sledgehammer. It just backfires because academic research demands that we study these very topics. That's the whole point. But okay, Here's where the story takes an even more serious turn. A search that comes back with 0 results is annoying, for sure. But at least you know it's broken, right? The author we're drawing from here argues that there's a much deeper, more silent danger lurking in these AI systems. Let's really break this down, because it's important. What we've seen so far is an open failure. It's obvious. You get an error, you know it's not working. A silent failure, though, that's invisible. The AI doesn't throw up an error message. Instead, it just quietly decides to hide things. It might bury the most controversial and maybe the most important research papers, and you would have no idea. You would never, ever know. And that is the fundamental fear here. Just imagine it. You're researching a complex, sensitive topic. The AI gives you back, say, a dozen really clean, seemingly good results. You'd think, great, my search was a success. But you would have absolutely no way of knowing that the AI, because of its secret safety rules, decided to just not show you the other 50 papers that were actually the most relevant, the most critical, just because it flagged them as too sensitive. So, where do we go from here? This brings us to a path forward, a path to transparency. Now that we see this new, really subtle risk on the horizon, what's the fix? How do we make sure these incredibly powerful new tools are actually helping research, not accidentally strangling it? Well, the solution proposed is a pretty clear 3-step plan. Think of it as a call for accountability. Step 1, clear documentation. The vendors who make this stuff have to tell us about every single filter they have in the pipeline. No more black boxes. Step 2, library controls. The libraries themselves need a dashboard, some way to control, tweak, or even turn off these filters when they're getting in the way of real research. And step 3, public audits. The whole community needs to be able to test these tools, to build ways to check up on them, and make sure these kinds of failures don't just creep back in later. And this quote really nails why this is so critical. The decisions that software engineers are making right now, in some office somewhere, could have huge, long-lasting effects on what we're all able to learn. If we don't demand transparency and control today, we're basically just sleepwalking into a future where these mysterious black box algorithms get to decide for us what's worth researching and what isn't. Which really leaves us with one last big question to think about. As AI gets more and more involved in helping us search for information, who's actually deciding what we find? Who's in control here? And maybe more importantly, are their goals the same as ours?